Welcome to Don't Hire an Agency Until You Listen to This Podcast. I'm Jeff Glick, joined by my partner in crime, Morgan Carroll. Morgan, how's it going today?
Oh, Jeff, how are you? You look great.
I feel great. I feel kind of old. Well, but old is new again, right?
Well, I think that's what we're going to talk about today is this ever present trend of things that used to be cool and hip coming back again and again and again and again, and why.
I mean,
Correct?
seriously, I went to see Devil Wears Prada 2 last week with the entire family. 20 years after, people were clamoring for a sequel, but, sequels used to be a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, because it took that long, but not 20 years later, or mining old IP and, you know, why come up with new ideas if you can just take old ideas and bring them back as quote new
Old
ideas?
ideas
And
that you've already paid for, so you don't have to pay to come up with new ideas. You just reuse the old ones.
absolutely, you don't want to go see another Disney live action remake of a Disney cartoon, of a Disney live action movie of a Disney cartoon.
IP is expensive. Paying for that IP is expensive. But reusing old IP or stuff that's in the public domain, well, that's great. Let's remake Wuthering Heights. I've never seen that before.
Did you want to in the first place? Come on.
I don't know. That guy from Euphoria, yeah, he's pretty cool.
All right. So here's the deal. This is why we're talking about this week and what's old is new again. Morgan and I were actually talking offline a few days ago, and it got our brains churning about marketing campaigns and advertising campaigns and slogans that disappear for no reason that seem like they're working, and now that people are trying to bring them back. And Morgan, you and I, we were talking about Las Vegas and what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but doesn't really stay in Vegas, and it really got your mind moving.
Well, I've been, for whatever reason, my streaming algorithm is showing me this same ad for Pack for Vegas over and over and over again. And there's nothing wrong with the Pack for Vegas campaign. It's a benign.
By the way, just real quickly as an aside, if you go to Vegas, should you really need to pack?
Although I did say I did a little background research, and it's like there's a whole pack, just like Get Ready for Me. There's a Pack for Vegas world out there. Like there's a whole Get Ready for Me world, a Get Ready with Me world. The idea of people packing for Vegas and talking about what they're packing for Vegas wasn't that crazy. The issue I had is if we're thinking about how things come back in perpetuity over and over and over again, they've got this incredible iconic line sitting on the shelf. Las Vegas tourism is cratering, and their solution was this sort of benign generic Pack for Vegas thing, which is just all these shots of fun times that you could have for Vegas, and come on, pack, get here. And for me, I just find it kind of the word I might use is malpractice for them to have a line on the shelf that has 20 years of unaided recall. It's got free media from endless parody and headlines that it's been used over and over. It's part of our cultural vernacular, and no agency can manufacture that kind of equity from scratch. So whatever poor agency created Pack for Vegas, they had this incredible asset that they weren't able to use. And when you think about not hiring an agency and the decisions you want to make around hiring an agency, they clearly already made the decision to do a new campaign before they hired an agency. And I think that to me is like, well, why would you leave that there? Why wouldn't you use that? Is it a cultural thing? Is it is it not fit with the audience? Does it not fit the economy? I don't know.
It also comes down to, I get sometimes things feel older, things feel stale. People feel like, oh, it's just the same old, but I feel like it actually takes a lot more work to take something that you've been using for a long time that's successful and still keep it new and fresh. And it's better off than trying to start with something else and starting from ground zero. And you've sat in those rooms. What are those decisions like?
Well, to me, I think you'd want to start with like your audience, and the audience that came of age when that campaign was out in the early 2000s. It's you and I. Now they're in their they're somewhere between like late 30s to late 50s. They've got disposable income, and they're going to spend more money on a trip to Vegas than anybody else. And you think about younger audiences will have some nostalgia associated with that line. When they hear it and they'll discover it, So for me, I think, not using it seems like a terrible idea. I also think it's very culturally resonant in this moment. You've got what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. We live in a world where privacy is paramount.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you use that line now? I would resonate more for me now. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. The idea of privacy and going somewhere just to have fun and letting loose and not having to worry about, the posts or whatever that's going to come as a result of it. For me, I think it's pretty much on the nose.
I think to me too, when you talk about Las Vegas, trips to Las Vegas are nostalgic, right? Like the whole reason you keep going back is because you had such a great time the last before,
Frank
or you're trying to
Sinatra,
recreate what happened the time before,
swingers,
or yeah, you want Sinatra, or you want to be out in the desert, and you
Vince
want to be out on
Vaughn,
the
and
strip, or you want to be swingers, or the movie Swingers, sorry, and in Vegas, baby, and the whole deal.
Fear and Loathing, Hunter S.
Yeah,
Thompson, Johnny Depp.
The
They've been.
Hangover. I mean,
It's gotta. To me, the fact that the Pack for Vegas idea is like alludes to it, but why wouldn't you embrace what you are? I love New York. Like that is another iconic tourism line. Why wouldn't you leverage the a thing that already has so much value? To me, I think it's not the agency's fault. I whatever agency did this work delivered on what they were asked to deliver, I would imagine. The brief was probably change. The assignment was, listen, we need to make a change. Vegas tourism is not doing well. It solved the problem of the guy who hired the agency, which is he needed to make some sort of change. The CMO
yeah.
of the Las Vegas tourism, I don't know who that person might be, but they obviously needed to make a change for the sake of making a change, or make a change, or walk away from that for whatever political reason. It solved his political problem, not their marketing problem.
Is there ever a time where you feel like making the change for the sake of change actually works? I feel like when brands have slogans, campaigns that work, and they feel like we need to change, whether that's hiring a new agency or someone new comes on board or whatever the reasoning behind it is, you always want to go back, right? Like
Change for the sake of change.
people are tied to what they know, like the whole Cracker Barrel disaster, right? Like we're going to modernize Cracker Barrel. Cracker Barrel is Cracker Barrel. Like people want it to be is what it is, and people want it to be what it is. Like, change for the sake of change, to me, is like the worst idea you could possibly go through from a marketing standpoint.
You mentioned before we even started, you mentioned the most interesting man in the world campaign that they brought back this year in the Super Bowl. Like, they had an icon, they had equity, they were smart enough to say, hey, let's use it.
Oh, totally. I mean, with the college football playoff, and I texted a friend because I used to work on Dos Equis years ago, and I was like, hey, is he really back? And they're like, no, they're absolutely bringing him back. I can tell a story. We were pitching Dos Equis for their sports marketing business. We built an entire campaign for college football around the most interesting man. We made it through the first round of the pitch, and they're going through the brief for the second round, and they're like, hey, you're all under NDA. You can't tell anybody this. And they show us the new scripts in the spot where they're literally sending the most interesting man in the world off into outer space.
Yeah,
we're going to replace him with someone younger because
they literally jettisoned him into outer space.
They sent Jonathan Goldsmith out into
their
space.
Brand equity. They're like, you know what? We don't want it. Let's get it off the planet.
If you had seen the 20 people in this conference room, or on this conference call before pre-video call, and it was just like, what are we supposed to, like, we literally sat there like, what are we supposed to do? Like, you literally just took her idea and shot it into space. And they sent the brand equity, and they spent time and they hired this French actor who didn't speak English well, and it was they wanted the most interesting man known as the Mim to be more active and to appeal to younger audiences, and it just never, like, it's about authenticity. It's not about younger or more active or trying to target an audience. It's like, if you have something that works, just keep finding new ways to make it work. That to me, and seeing him come back, what's old is new again. I mean, granted,
I mourned that campaign when it went away. I mean, as a former copywriter, I looked so jealously on that work and always, revered it. And when they brought the campaign They brought it back for the Super Bowl this year. They didn't even use the people who wrote it the first time. I saw Jeff Kling, who wrote the original campaign. He had a very gracious comment on LinkedIn about the new work. But for me, I'm like, God, that was something that they could have kept going in perpetuity. You think about the Mayhem campaign that Leo Burnett did. That went away for a little while. What an amazing, iconic campaign, an idea that something awful is going to happen and your insurance company is there to protect you from that awful thing, which is mayhem. It just, and they also have an incredible actor in Dean Winters who, embodies that idea so perfectly. But it's still going. They went away from it for a while and then made the wise decision to come back to it.
Look at Nike. No matter what they do, no matter what campaign they try, it always circles back to just do it.
So I guess, it's what's old is new again. If, you made the mistake as a brand of walking away from one of your core, brand tenets, yes, it makes a ton of sense to go back to it. In culture, it makes sense to go back to it because it's cheaper. But the argument for going away from it, is it ever valid? Like, are there reasons that you should ever walk away from something that's that iconic? When they walked away from what happens here stays here, or they evolved it from what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas to what happens here stays here, I think over the years. And then they went away from that altogether because it felt like sort of shady. And I don't know what they did. Now they did Pack for Vegas.
Family friendly or,
the Vegas example, the Dos Equis example, the Mayhem example, when you have something that valuable, not using it is malpractice.
Have you seen The Gap came back recently with the actors dance, with the people dancing, right? The dancing spots, which to me, I'm really glad that is something that's old that came back that I actually am really happy to see back because I think it's perfect for the social media age, right? Like those are perfect tailor-made TikTok style campaigns.
Well,
and
the agency that they're doing that with, they're doing it in a very smart way. I actually, I see the work that they're doing, and I give it a lot of credit because I think they're leaning into equity, but they're also, you just described also how they're modernizing it. So to me, I think that's beyond even what's old is new again. They've taken it and they've burnished it and polished it and relaunched it.
No, and you're elevating it, right? Like that's the whole point of taking a campaign or a slogan or an idea that works that still feels, it should always still feel like the brand. It shouldn't feel like you're walking away from it. And I think the other thing people do is like we get so focused on tactics and this is the audience we want to reach and we have to reach them in a very certain way. And we forget that like you are who you are and you need, you can mess with the spokes in the wheel, but like if the wheel doesn't have the center, it's not a wheel anymore. And
sometimes
you lose sight of that.
There are examples where when they walk away from it. So New Coke is obviously the most iconic version of, changing something for the sake of changing it and what a terrible idea that is. And there's many, there's other examples that, of making those changes and, sometimes going back to it is the correction. I think it's also sometimes really lazy. Like it's the lazy solution. And I think, it's the cheaper, lazier, easier solution to just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. And sometimes it really does not work at all. I don't know if when you think about examples of failure when they've gone back to something, sometimes relaunching something, you see they remade, the forgettable remakes of the Baywatch movies. They've remade every like 80s TV show and series as a modern. They remade an A-Team movie. They're all of these things that you think about that they've gone back to, and they haven't really resonated, and they've kind of diminished the equity of the original. So it doesn't always have a positive impact. They don't always do it as well as Gap did, or Mayhem did, or or others, or Most Interesting Man.
No, for sure. I think also like, we were talking about before we hopped on here, how many people go watch old sitcoms or, why is it that The Office and Friends and Big Bang Theory are some of the most popular shows on streaming? and they haven't been out for how many, it's been 5, 7, 10, 12 years since they've been produced or longer, because there's a comfortability that people are nostalgic. It's not even nostalgic. It's just comfortable, right?
The word you use is comfort, and I think I've heard it referred to as comfort television, where people literally put it on as sort of a background reminder of something that exists out there that they can use almost like a blanket, in their home, having that on. I know people who do that. I know people who
No,
do that with
absolutely.
30
Well, and
Rock and other,
also, yeah, and I was going to say this too. Like, what you always have to remember is you're introducing new audiences. As your audience gets older, and then there's the new generation coming forward. When I worked at NBC back in the day, they usually used to have a slogan during rerun season: "If you haven't seen it, it's new to you." And I can say from proof, like just even in my own home, my kids have binged Grey's Anatomy, right? That's been on for what, 15, 18, 20 years. But like they're 15 and 18 years old. So the fact that they've gone back and they've watched it and now they're caught up and they actually prefer the older episodes to the new episodes because they like the classic cast and they want the original cast. That should be, instructive to people of like, people want what it's not just what they're comfortable with. It's like the original's more often the best. And like, you just got to find ways to enhance it and make it, how do we make it, enhance it, make it better? And sometimes it's just reintroducing it to your new audience. It's not that you have to change it. It's a
that's really
reintroduction.
my 10-year-old daughter is watching Gilmore Girls like religiously, like working her way through the seasons. I grew up in Connecticut, and she talks about the fictional town in Connecticut. She asked me, have you been there? I'm like, no, sweetie, it's not actually a real place. But like, she is
No,
such
it's the
a
Warner
diehard.
Brothers lot in Los Angeles, actually.
Yes, so she, huge fan of this. But there is something, when you think about what's old is new again. Sometimes what's old is perfectly good, to live on in a modern world, and to be remembered and found by someone new, like our kids finding things that we knew growing up. But is there is there a rule for why some things work and why some things don't? How do you know if like, and how can you predict? I think the show Suits is, they brought that show back because of its success in streaming. And what are the signals that you should bring something back? How do you know why didn't they bring what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas? What were the signals that they didn't, that either they ignored or decided not to leverage? Are there rules? Are there reasons?
I think there's a difference between bringing it back as something new and different versus bringing it back in a form that an audience that's learned seeing it that had seen the older version would still feel comfortable with it. Like I think Scrubs is a really good example from a content perspective. Okay. Obviously, there's the original series with Zach Braff and Donald Faison. Then they go off and then show ends. They're doing the T-Mobile commercials, so they're actually still playing those characters.
The T-Mobile commercials had a hand in that. Those guys doing those T-Mobile commercials for years, and then in the Super Bowl a couple times, like Scrubs was one of those shows that has comfort television that people watch. Absolutely. They brought those guys back because of the streaming success, and now it's just like Suits led to an entirely new run of the show.
Absolutely. And now it's a new run of the show. It's the characters, X amount of years down the road. You have 90% of the cast back. I think it's the same thing with Devil Wears Prada 2, right? Like we joked about it in the beginning, but it's the same characters moving on in the same version of the story, as opposed to we're recasting this idea and starting all over from.
Now, I haven't seen Devil Wears Prada 2 yet, but yes, I will say that the Scrubs relaunch is being acknowledged as they did, similar to how the Gap took what was old and brought it back in a way that was relevant. They've taken like some of the aspects of these characters, and they've talked about how that youth and positivity and silliness they used to have on the old show, and how they've lived their lives have kind of taken some of that out of them. They're not the same people they used to be, and they acknowledge that. And I'm like, incredibly grown up and incredibly thoughtful. And to me, like, if you're going to make something old new again, boy, do you need to give it that level of authenticity. And I think they did that very well with Scrubs. I was like, it's a great example.
Absolutely, but it's not a perfect formula. And I'll say, from a cautionary tale, Sex and the City coming back as and just like that, not as well received. And then ultimately, I think the part that they forgot, was that show was fun. Like above everything else, like part of it was just supposed to be fun, and people weren't having fun. Like I don't think the watching experience was. You can
Well,
still
yeah,
be
it kind of became
serious and
soap
tell serious
opera.
stories, and people mature in the stories that they're telling when the women are 50 versus when they're in their 30s in New York. And
Is it that
there's
different
stories when
though
they're
from
50 in New
Substance?
York, but
Because
like the
these
show's
women are
still got
now,
to be fun.
yeah, these women are now dealing with like grown up problems, like like Big dies in the first episode of Just Like That. Like that's a bit like they're dealing with adult problems. Being a widow, suddenly in your 50s, like what a challenge that you're now dealing with. I think that um, the part of bringing things back is bringing them back in a way that is fresh and relevant. And yes, did they try to do that, and did it work? It wasn't as successful, but having seen Devil Wears Prada, I know it's the #1 movie in America. I can't tell you whether or not personally I can vouch for whether they kept it fresh, but as I think about that movie,
I
will
think it
there
was
be a
fresh
third
enough.
one? Will there be a third one?
No,
Probably, because
no, I don't
here's
think so.
here's the thing. It's like, how much money are you going to throw, at at those stars, and at what point? I mean, if this movie is the #2 is as successful as they say, like, you're going to say to Meryl Streep, "Here's $100 million." Do you think she's not going to make a third one? Probably she would.
Well, the game each, I think
She
I read it
deserves
was
it.
like 12 to they each got 12 to 15 each. They all three women took the exact same amount.
Well, I mean, and they
And
deserve it, but is the next one going to be 3 times that? I don't, it's hard to say no.
it's always hard to say no. All right, let's go back to where we started. You're in the room. Las Vegas tourism comes to you. They want to potentially move away. How would you then convince them and say, I think you have something that really works, but there's a fresh way that we could go about doing this so that
What
you
I
don't
would
feel
do is
like you're throwing away years and years of equity.
I think that's a great question. And how I would do it is I would prove to them the value of that equity. I would do some research to find out exactly the value of that 20 plus years of unaided awareness, the cultural, like, I would do it both anecdotally and from a data perspective of like the value that they are sitting on, that they're ignoring. And yes, there might be some baggage with it that they would want to consider evolving. I mean, it's not about doing things that are criminal. It's about having fun, letting loose, and not worrying about people watching you, noticing you, and or making fun of you or doing something silly. It's like embrace that spirit of just freedom that you could have only in Las Vegas. That would be how I would want to approach it. I do think whatever agency was sitting in front of them when that
Yep.
happened wanted the business, and they got the business. They did what the client asked them to do. The issue for me is, like, you don't hire an agency. Don't hire an agency till the brief you're giving that agency is going to be
Yeah.
successful. The issue wasn't the agency here or the work. The work is what they delivered what they were asked for, I'm sure.
Is there a point though where the agency has to go, I know you really want something new, but we also have this idea of if you want to stick, we also believe though that you should stick with what you have. I mean, like, I know that takes a lot of gumption. I know there's financial pressures. I get all those things. Maybe I'm just living in the Pollyanna, best case scenario world. But to me, I just feel like it's sometimes better. I'd rather lose and tell the truth than win and do some work that I'm not really proud of.
In the early 2000s, I worked on Outback Steakhouse. They had gone away from No Rules, Just Right. And my creative partner and I went to them and said, you are sitting on something that everyone, they say Outback Steakhouse, everyone says No Rules, Just Right. Why aren't you using that? And we showed them a way to do that, that made sense and was relevant. And I honestly, I don't even know today if they're still using that line or not, but they should be. It's like, use what you've got, as a brand. Funds are scarce. Why not leverage every asset you have at your disposal to drive sales? And if you've got a line like what happens here stays here, or No Rules, Just Right, use it. Make it work. I mean, the Army just went back to be all you can be, I saw, and I was like, God, that was smart. Like, because what you're selling to people you're recruiting is
Yes.
we will make you the best version of yourself.
Absolutely.
Boy, that's something I want to buy into as an 18-year-old.
for sure. I think it definitely speaks to, and you're like, it's an old line that speaks to a brand new audience that hasn't seen it before, and
I
you can
remember
bring
it
it
in the
with, and it
70s. I remember the
absolutely
jingle that went with it from the 1970s.
for sure. And before it was about be all you can be was like, I'm going to see the world and I can do different things. And now with the mindsets and focus on mental health and personal health and taking care of
Training, the
yourself,
training and education you're going to get, by
yeah,
joining the army. And like, that's what the ad I saw was some woman jumping out of a helicopter to rescue someone in the ocean. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, she's being all she can be. She's saving lives. Yes, check, done.
Jack,
So
done. So here's the thing: we started this episode, and I'm sure people thought, "Oh, they're gonna make fun of being what's old is new again." No, we're all for what's old is new again. We're actually kind of more about what's old should never get old, and it should always just be forefront and front of mind. If you have something that works, keep just looking for different ways to to use it and create
I
and
would
be able
frame it
to
this way.
showcase it to a new audience.
Yeah, don't hire an agency until you've decided whether you want to solve a marketing problem or your own employment problem. Which is the problem you're going to solve? Because, if you're trying to keep your job, you might make a decision that isn't necessarily in the best interest of the marketing. And I think that's what happened with Las Vegas is.
Which, and by the way, at the end of the day, you're going to lose your job.
Yeah, you are. Yeah. So, it happens. But it's really interesting to see that this is going to continue, this trend. And I support it. And like you said, I think there's got to be a real good reason to walk away from strong brand equity. And the business reasons have to outweigh the business value.
No, 100%. I agree. And I think that's a great place to put a pin in this episode. Thanks everybody for watching Don't Hire an Agency. Check us out on all the socials. And Morgan, it's great talking with you as always. I can't wait to see what we're up to next.
Yeah, I know. Well, hopefully we don't get too old between now and the next episode.